Hello, Jamie. And welcome to the Comic Literate podcast, the podcast that deep dives into the best of comic books, graphic novels, mangas, and penny dreadfuls. Did you appreciate the start there, or did you? It was a different start. It would seem like you answered immediately anyway.
Well, no, because now you've said that, you got the silence in there.
No, it's going to start from, it's going to be me going, how are you? And you going, well, now that you've said that, I'm going to start now.
No, right, you don't get to do this.
The editing world is my realm, and I control it how I see fit. Or, I'll just leave it how it is.
Fucking tyrant.
Tyrant?
Absolute fucking despot.
I prefer fascist, because that's like the current nomenclature.
Yeah, as long as you're a National Socialist, and then you're a liberal.
Well, yeah, they were actually socialists, weren't they? As we were educated, we should probably point out specifically, we were educated. If you heard last week, we were educated by a very helpful.
If you don't know, go back and listen to last week's.
Yeah, probably a helpful young man, I would say. Probably a young man, we assume.
Yeah, I'm all right. How are you?
Probably wearing a red cap. Don't know what the letters say. Anyway, yes, we are back at it again, back in the building, and how are you feeling?
I mean, you're not my favourite person right now.
Is it because I'm your host, the soon-to-be known as Comic Stan, and with me, as always, is my tenacious co-host, Jamie?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the tenacity I'm going to be able to muster today is going to be rallying against any form of structure as an act of rebellion, because you made me read two superhero comics in a row.
Now, what I will say is, are we saying it's just the comic that your current state right now, or are we blaming it on anything else?
No, I was having a great day until I read the comic.
Wow. Well, you could put that as a review on the front.
It ruined my day.
Yeah. Although, to be fair, if I created a piece of fiction and someone reviewed that, I'd be like, well, that's too funny not to go on the front.
Well, this is it, isn't it? Marvel, if you'd like it as a jacket blurb, you can have it. Ruined my day.
Now, on the one hand, I think we are talking about something that, as we established last week, is not for you. Like, you more eloquently. I'm going to
let you struggle.
Eloquently. That's close enough. Eloquently put it last week that, you were a lot kinder on it. Well, you still criticised it a fair bit, and rightfully so, but you were a bit kinder on it. And I feel like you've lost that this week.
Well, I think my issue is that this comic book is for somebody who doesn't have the gift of sight.
So it's in Braille?
Well, no. And that's, I think, yeah, the only way you could enjoy it is if you don't look at it. You just have somebody narrate it to you, I suppose.
Would you say, okay, hang on, before we get into it, we should probably, someone might be sitting there having somehow not looked at the title of the episode and gone, what are they talking about? So we are talking about this week, the current releasing run of Amazing Spider-Man, which was written by, you'd think I would have had it here in front of me, but I didn't. Written by Zeb Wells and cover art and artist by John Romita.
What else has John Romita done?
Let's have a look. He looks like is actually most well known for doing Spider-Man for probably the longest time. He actually, if this is the same guy, and I'm pretty sure it is, because in the blurb which I took, which I may or may not read later, they actually mentioned about getting John Romita back as like a big thing. So it looks like he's been doing it for potentially since the 50s. I think he's actually been doing art for Marvel since the 50s, because I'm looking at a Captain America Atlas comic from 1954, which is credited as to him. So he's been doing it a long time.
How old is he?
He is 93.
Oh, I can't.
We might actually have, it says John Romita Sr., so I'm going to double check if it might be like a John Romita Jr. that's done this one.
Yeah,
let's double check that.
I can't voice the opinions I have if they're about a 93-year-old man, Ryan. That makes me uncomfortable.
So, having looked at John Romita's Wikipedia, the one I was looking at was John Romita Sr., and it looks like this was written by, this was art by John Romita Jr., so
it makes a lot of sense that he only got his job through fucking nepotism then.
So you weren't a fan of the art, I'm guessing?
Hard garbage, sir.
So
most unfavourable is my opinion of the artwork. I am of the opinion that John Romita John Romita Jr. hasn't actually seen a face. Because if he has, he's not learned how to draw one yet.
So we are in a bit of a disagreement about this, and I suppose we're starting off hot. We're starting off hot.
Yeah, because you're wrong. You're just definitely wrong. Like I'm literally looking at panels that I took photographs of from the original copy, the hard copy of this book that I read. Yeah, I'm looking at photographs I took of the art. And it's just so janky all over the place.
So we should probably define, because we also had this smaller topic off air. What do you define as janky? What do you mean by that?
Well, so the anatomy's all wrong. The faces just don't look like human faces. He's fine when he's drawing Spider-Man in a mask, but as soon as he has to draw a human being emoting, he just gets it wrong. The faces just don't look like faces, nor do they look good. The face, almost all of his human faces just look piss weak, unfortunately.
So with regards to the human shape, right? So you showed me some of the panels that you were referring to. A couple of them their specific context is that Peter Parker is beaten up and his face is meant to be in, like bumps and stuff and like black eye and swollen and stuff. Now, obviously, you showed me the shape and immediately I said, yeah, obviously that shape is not human head shape. Like you can, if you're going for realism, you could criticize it on that.
But it is going for realism. It's going for a realistic art style. And none of the faces look good. They're all of the proportions are out on all of the faces. They're all janky as fuck. None of them are expressive in any functional way. The artwork is bad.
But can we say that it's realistic if there's panels that use like words, sound effects to like, illustrate? It's got like bit where it's like busting out of a safe and it says like bam or like crash or something.
Yeah, but that's just comic book stuff. It's not going for a really cartoony style, is it? It's not stylized the way the Ones was. It's not stylized the way that something like the example that you gave is that, well, you like Steven Universe and that artwork's not realistic. And I'm like, yeah, but it's good.
I pulled something out of my arse to just be like a cartoon style that's not meant to be realistic.
This is just bad.
And I would say that between realistic and non-realistic, I would say it's a spectrum, and this is the closer end of realism, but still without conforming to trying to be as realistic as possible. If
the spectrum is autistic Peter Parker not able to express his emotions through his face, then yes, it is a spectrum.
So you're showing me one of the panels, and I don't think it matters as much for the listener which panel it is, because you would probably say that most of his faces have this problem, right?
So the eyes are different fucking sizes.
Yeah, because he's turned slightly.
Not enough for the perspective to change on his eyes.
I actually don't even see the eye change
the eyes.
shape.
The eyes are completely.
It looks like one's slightly open more than the other, because the eyebrow's raised.
No,
one of the eyebrows is raised.
That's janky. Look, how can you not see how ugly that is?
I don't see how you have such an issue with it.
It's so bad.
I fair enough. Subjectively, yeah, you can not like it or dislike it, but you're trying to claim objectively that it doesn't.
Objectively, this is ugly. Like, it's bad, and the panel on top of it is just in a completely different art style. So that kid's face is very cartoony, and then he's gone for something photorealistic on the panel underneath. They're two completely different art styles.
They're different characters. One's a child and one's an adult. So when
they're different art styles. It's so piss poor. I don't know how you can't see it.
It's not that I don't say disagree with your specific. It's not that I don't agree with your specific points, except for the eyes. Like, obviously we disagree on that, but. It's not that I don't agree with specific points. It's more that
her eyes are pointing in different directions, Ryan.
I don't see that at all.
She has Wang Eye.
I see her looking in one direction.
No, she's looking in two different directions. One of her eyes is going in the wrong direction.
I genuinely don't know how you get that.
Well, this eye is looking over there.
No, it's not. They're both looking to the left of the side. Yeah, they're both looking off to the same side, off panel.
But they're not.
I don't know what you're getting at. I
feel
bad. I almost feel like you're I feel like you're almost pranking me like it's April 1st. Like, that's what I genuinely believe when you're showing me that, going, look, their eyes going the other way. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're
He
talking
looks
about.
like a pug in this panel,
Yes.
not a human.
That's the one where he's got a beaten up face. So my point was going to be, and I'm not, right, those are the worst parts. So I'll 100% give you that. They are like a worse depiction of a beaten up face, right? But at the very least, I'll say, this is what I'm saying about, I don't think it's having to be realistic, or I don't think it was they were going for realism. And that, I think, is more of like a metaphor of like, it's an over exaggeration of like, to a almost cartoony effect of like what a beaten up, swollen face looks like. And it's those parts showing out with such a degree that they're like overboard showing you that he's beaten up. So again, I don't think it's,
I
don't
found
think they were
it
going for the realism.
borderline unreadable.
Well, that is odd. That's odd to me. I did not think you were going to like love this. I didn't think you were going to hate it this much either. And that's what surprised to me is the amount of hate that you have for it. Would you say this is better or worse than the Flash one we did last week?
They exist in the same feeding trough.
But would you rank them? Like if you had to separate them?
No.
You would equate them as the same?
Yeah.
That's
They're
interesting.
they're equally bad.
But then the Flash, you didn't mind the art as much. You did not complain about the Flash art nearly as much as you complain about this one. So if you're saying they're equally bad, you're having different reactions to both those.
Yeah,
You didn't say the Flash was great.
They're
art.
equally bad in different ways. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
Like,
what was so bad about the Flash art? Because you didn't react. You can go back and listen to the episode. You did not react to this level to the Flash art at all. You reacted this level to Cyborg Dad's mention and other lines of the writing.
Yeah. Well, no,
but you didn't react this strongly to the art.
Things can be bad for different reasons. You've asked me to rank the comic books in general, not the artwork.
Yeah. What I mean is, you're saying that the art was the same. Like
no,
equally.
I said that. I said no. What are you on about?
I thought you. Sorry, that might have been me. I thought you just said that you thought the art was equally bad.
I'm on trial here. I've had a negative opinion about something, and now I'm on trial.
I'm just asking you to explain your point so I can understand it better.
Right. So the books are equally as bad, right?
Right.
It's just that the artwork here is abysmal.
Right. And so you're saying, sorry, the art in the Flash one was better than this one?
It was fine. It was mostly serviceable. Yeah. No, it was fine. It looked good, didn't it? It looked okay.
Okay. That's where we're getting off confusion. So yeah, fair enough. Understandable. Yeah, I did not have the same hate for the art. I thought the art was fine in places.
You liked it.
I thought the fine was...
You've been fervently defending it.
I thought the art was fine most parts. I liked some of the larger big page panels, but it was most of those were when Spider-Man was in his costume.
Yeah,
so like you said,
Spider-Man he's fine at drawing superhero. Yeah, when he's drawing superhero gubbins, he's fine. When he's drawing people in suits and people with masks on and things that don't look human, he's fine. It's when he has to draw a human face, he just doesn't get it right at any point.
So here I think is kind of the deeper debate, and this is probably actually the most we've talked about art for anything, because even the one's art was like, we were like, it's fine, but you had the main issue of the characters not being different enough to know who was saying what.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously this one we're going into a lot more detail. I guess I didn't go into it expecting realistic art, or I don't think I go into comics generally.
She looks like a fuck doll.
Yeah, I'll give you that one. That is a very blank expression. Yeah, I'll give you that one.
She's just found out somebody's going to marry her. She doesn't even look like she's fucking being blessed with consciousness.
You nailed it with like lifeless doll. Like it definitely, yeah, I'll give you that.
It's like he can't draw a human face. He just doesn't draw a good face. And like, surely as a fucking illustrator for comic books, the one thing you need to be able to draw is a decent face.
So I'm looking at the first page here again, and like I'm looking at it, and most of it I would say is fine. And I think like I agree, the bad ones, the ones that I agree with you as being bad, like I agree with you on that. But most of them are just like fine, like not noteworthy, but just fine to me at least.
I will die on this hill. We can do this panel by panel if you want.
I mean, I don't know how much of an interesting podcast it might make. follow us page by page at home, I guess, if you want.
Yeah, because like I'm willing to die on this hill. This is piss poor. And do you know what? Like the thing with comic books and graphic novels is when the art is great, it makes it, and when the art is weak, it kind of spoils it. But even on those first couple pages, look, he's drawn Peter Parker kind of front on and just underneath, and he's given him Voldemort's nose.
Yeah,
look.
I'm looking at that same panel, and I now see it more now that you've pointed it out.
Do you see what I mean? It's just whenever he draws a human face.
I agree with you on that, but then when you go to the panels below that, I would say they are all just fine. So those two ones at the top, both really bad. Zoom-ins and expressions seem to be this artist's weakest points.
But Peter Parker has a different fucking nose in every single panel on that page. Look, different nose. That is a different nose.
Was just looking at those, and they look exactly the same to me.
No, different nose. One of them's upturned and one of them's completely flat.
No, they're not. They're definitely not. I'm looking at them now. The ones you just showed me.
Yeah, this one's a tiny bit upturned, and that one's completely straight down. They're different noses.
I think they almost get stenciled over again, like the same again. Like they look exactly the same to me. But I think there might be a bit of seeing more issues when you're already displeased with it, and me glossing over some of the worst ones because I'm just fine with it. I think we're both coming from a bit of when you see some good or some bad, you continue more on that route and you miss some of it.
Look at that.
Is that the nose or the hair? Or
Well, from that angle, he should have a nose, but he doesn't look.
Right, let me find that one. Hang on.
Look at it.
Hang on. Yeah, I'm finding it.
So bad. I'm really sorry, guys. You're just going to have to wait while we argue.
So there's a little bit more of a... Oh, right, sorry. Not the other guy, not Peter.
Yeah.
Yeah, that side profile is horrific, yeah. Yeah, I'll give you that.
He's drawn a side profile with no nose on it.
And where an eye probably should be, but it's not. Kind of turn around the side.
That's not a human face, is it?
It looks kind of like in the early Doctor Who, where those people made of plastic, but they didn't have a face yet.
You tried to argue the toss with me, and the more I look at it, the more examples I can find you of just jank faces.
But then, again... Is there any argument, and I'm playing devil's advocate, I'm just asking, is there any argument for it not meant to be realistic? You can not like it, and you can hate it.
Right. So, you're using the term realistic to mean photorealism, right? Even when you're
even proportionally.
But if you're drawing a human face, even if you're drawing a cartoon of a human face, it needs to have a fucking nose on it when it's in profile, doesn't it? That he just hasn't drawn none of the faces look like faces, and you can say, well, it's the art style, but if his art style is just bad, then it's not a creative choice, it's just bad art, and that is what this is.
What about, for example, and I'm picking this example out of my ass, but something like say early seasons of South Park or something, when that was meant to be people could you make an argument for that, be this is the style we're trying to do, and we enjoy it, and
but they nailed it. They nailed that style. He has not nailed this style, has he?
But so you wouldn't say that if it's his own style and he says this is how I want them to look, this is I think we're debating again the point of the art, and
the point of the art is to convey that there is a human being with a face in the panel.
Yeah,
and it does not do that.
You knew that, but you're criticizing it, which is fair enough. But
it's bad.
You still got the message.
And you've looked at all the panels that I've pointed out and acknowledged, yes, they are bad. I don't know why you're still arguing the toss
A couple
with
of
me.
them I could not see what you are... a couple of them I couldn't see your point, but most of them, yes. But what I'm saying is, if they were no, this is the... again, if we said the point of the art was to convey, a person A is talking to person B, you still knew there was that. So if you're judging it by the strictest, what is the purpose of the art... You didn't enjoy it. You disliked it so much that it put you off even focusing on the story. So you can say it failed on that front, but that's to you specifically as sole reader.
But if you draw a face, if you're a comic book artist and you draw a face in profile without a nose,
I mean, I can't see a nose, but it's very
you done
faint
fucked up.
Yeah, it's faint enough to the point where I completely understand why you don't like it.
It looks like Voldemort.
Yeah, from the side, yeah. But again, my point being is, it's conveying that there is a face with a nose. Like,
I mean,
you
only
said they've done a bad job of it, but according to you, yeah.
Yeah, the art's, it's just uckers. It's just really ugly throughout.
That's fair. But I think it's one of those odd ones where, like, I think the purpose of this kind of comic, I know before I say this, it sounds like it's excusing the whole, like, quality of thing or whatever, but you know what? I'll go back on it. What I was going to get at was, like, is the point of this comic to have good art if it's only just trying to get across another Spider-Man story? But I know exactly what I think I know exactly what you're going to say, where it should still be held to the highest standard of good art in other comics. Would you say?
Well, do you know what? If they want to churn out fucking garbage, they can churn out garbage, but you have to acknowledge that it's fucking garbage.
I mean, we are reading Marvel, so.
And I generally like Marvel more than DC, and the artwork in Marvel comics is normally fine. But I read this one and went, nah. Like, fair. It's just bad. Like, I don't like, if the purpose of him sitting down to draw was to draw a bunch of faces that don't look like human faces, then well done, mate, you succeeded. But surely, if you're gonna draw a face anyway, you might as well draw one that actually looks like a face.
What about the green character who's, like, back from the dead? Like, because he's meant to be kind of fucked up looking anyway, so.
Again, I said right at the top, superhero shenanigans he's fine at. The grey bloke, the grey fella, he looks fine most of the time. Different in every panel. And again, there's just no consistency. Peter, there's about 4 or 5 different versions of Peter that we see throughout the book. He looks different every time I see him.
Do you think it's the angles which seem to be the biggest issue? Because I know there was some, like, completely emotionless, full straight on views which were fucked up, but some of the angles, like, seem to be, like, more difficult. I don't know if that would be more difficult for an artist or not.
Perspective is difficult, but if you are drawing comic books for Marvel, you should be able to draw.
I tell you what, I think it's having only seen these now with a closer inspection and the points you've pointed out, I don't know if I need to, like, then go back to better comics and see how they did it, because I kind of, like, don't remember that specifically how other comics did those points better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it
might be I generally, like, I'll say this now, I'm one who has to remind myself to look at the art and actually appreciate it, and it's always easier for me, and I think it's a big reminder when it's like a big full page spread, and I go, oh, look at that, like, that's good. But I do find, and I think this is kind of like shining a light on my own shortcoming of not paying enough attention to the art when it's like smaller panels and there's things happening. I just generally, my biggest reason, I mean, part of why we did this was slight scheduling thing where we needed something that was a bit smaller and condensed, but we could still get a bit of conversation out of. And what better than a currently releasing issue? So this is the currently releasing Spider-Man series. And we did it just mainly so that have something shorter this week and then maybe a bigger, more in-depth thing next week. The reason I picked it mainly because I'm reading this. We're only covering issues 1 to 5 of this. It's the first volume.
You liked it, didn't you, when you read it?
I specifically liked the writing. I enjoy the writing more. So this is my really long way around point of being like, what did you think of the writing?
I don't know.
See, that's interesting. So it's interesting because again, I'm not having such like a in-depth look at the art.
Yeah.
So when you start going, oh, the art's horrible, and my instinctive response being like, what? No, it's not. And then going back looking, it's like, I just didn't pay that much attention.
Again.
Has the reverse happened to you, do you think? But in the negative way.
I found this comic almost unreadable. Panel layout, hideous. There were like 5 horizontal panels going down the page. It didn't scan very well. The panel layout was horrible. I followed the story just fine, but
it's good you say that because we're now at the part where you try and tell us what happened in the story without spoiling it.
Oh my god. Okay.
You see how I said I checked you just in case, because if you had been like, you know what, I can't recall any of the story, I would have just let you go. But because you've walked into the, I think I could remember the story.
Do you like Picasso's later work?
Impressionist?
Because if you like Picasso's Impressionist era, you're going to
I might have got that wrong. I don't know for sure if it was Impressionist. I might have...
it might be his Cubist era.
Absurdist? Is that a thing in art?
1 minute. Because that is actually funny. Do you like Picasso's later work? Because if you like seeing faces that have been restructured and distorted beyond all belief, you're going to love The Amazing Spider-Man.
So was it his Impressionist era?
There's no name for it.
Right. Let's say postmodern for his time or something.
Well, no, because postmodern means something very specific, doesn't it?
Absurdist?
I mean, I think
his wacky era.
You know where he just started
the
painting
eyes
faces that didn't look like faces.
Yeah, the eyes are all the wrong places.
Yeah. You know the ones. Yeah, because if not, I'm going to go on down a Pablo Picasso rabbit hole. In all seriousness, I found the story to be a bit generic.
Okay. See, that's interesting, because I made specific notes about things I found about it that weren't as generic for superhero comics, and that was part of the reason why I thought it'd be interesting to talk about
A bunch of the story beats were the same as the Miles Morales comic.
Well, so one of the big notes. So we're getting straight into it. We're covering all 5 issues just straight from the start. No non-spoiler. You know our recommendations at this point, so no need to get into those.
Yeah, don't bother.
But one of the main points I thought, which is interesting, which I kind of had while reading this, was of this 5-issue story arc, it didn't culminate in a big bad final fight with the bad guy. It culminated in the issue before the last one, Spider-Man getting tricked in what I thought was genuinely like a clever trick in this kind of seizing territory New York mob system. And then the last part, there wasn't actually a big fight. It was Spider-Man tricking the character Tombstone back and like getting them even.
Did you not 100% see that coming though?
It wasn't to be seen coming until it happened at the end, I thought.
What,
you mean Spider-Man being tricked, or Spider-Man doing it back?
No, Spider-Man being tricked.
I didn't see it initially. When I reread it now, I noticed the bit with the F train.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't notice that initially.
100% they told you what was happening.
Well, I'd say they signposted it and then it happened, yeah.
Yeah. If you've like been to New York and got on a train in New York, you would know.
But most people in the world haven't, so it's not.
But we both have.
Yeah, I did. Mine was over a decade ago, so I remember like where the F train goes to Harlem or not.
Yeah,
but it was more the point of like when I first saw it initially, I thought it was showing how ruthless Tombstone is with his goons, and then rereading, going, oh yeah, that was like the signposting of them not being in Harlem like he said he was. Yeah. But I still thought, but regardless of it being signposted or saw it coming or not, I still thought it was interesting and more interesting than the usual like, I'm going to get you and I'm going to find the people that you love and hurt them. And
admittedly, it was the only story beat that I found interesting.
Yeah.
And I looked at it and went, oh, okay, that's all right. And, that was good.
And then Spider-Man tricking Tombstone back using the same thing.
Yeah.
So the way that Tombstone obviously got away with using Spider-Man is when people are like, oh, it's awfully convenient that Spider-Man took out your enemies for you. And he goes, I would never work with Spider-Man because we know that none of us would, because that's the worst thing you could possibly do. And then later Spider-Man's like, hey, I sent what's his name, the green guy, after one of your areas. Didn't want to interject because then people might think we were working together, and using the exact same thing back. So I thought, in terms of we know the generic superhero story arc of bad guy, trouble happens, big boss fight, resolved, and then like maybe a signpost of a bigger bad behind the original one, or those kind of things. And I thought this was interesting, where it was like more of a more intelligent than the typical like tricking rather than a big fight at the end. So just on that base, I thought it was different.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that that's interesting enough for me to recommend it as a piece of storytelling, though.
I suppose obviously I'm comparing it explicitly to your usual superhero comic. But yeah, I said I'm just comparing it to the stereotypical, again, Marvel DC superhero comic.
It just felt like superhero shenanigans. Like, him being chained up in that basement for a bit was exactly what happened to Miles Morales in the last Spider-Man comic we read. It just felt like superhero shenanigans.
I mean, we are reading a superhero comic, so...
Yeah, I know, and Unfortunately, the story fell completely flat for me.
Yeah, we are going to keep coming back to, and we're not going to do any super stuff for a while until whatever the next big comic, big movie tie-in is. But we're not going to do any super stuff for a while for having done it for 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
But we are going to keep going back to the point of me being into the genre. I'll see the better and worse ones, and if you're not into the genre, they just seem much more of all the same to someone who's not into them.
Yeah, and I do see that nuance of Peter Potter trip, but I don't think that little nuance is enough for me to be able to recommend it as a piece of storytelling. They're all just so bland, and that's the thing. The story was bland, unfortunately. There's none of that rich character development that engages me in a story. Peter's a bit down on his luck. He's looking for a job. Everybody's worried about Peter.
Yeah.
That's the subtext of this story. There's not even particularly anything interesting happening in the subtext of the story.
You weren't interested in the mysterious thing that happened beforehand that keeps getting referenced?
Well, no, because I just assumed that was some bollocks that happened in whatever came before this.
So, yeah. So, again, like, as I always say, like, I always want to get your perspective of someone who doesn't know what's happening. I interpreted that even though I hadn't read the thing that happened right before, I still interpreted that this was a thing that happened before was not something anyone had seen before.
Right. Okay.
So it was a mysterious thing had happened previously, and that's what's causing the repercussions now.
Yeah.
The only reason I know that, and I think that's, again, this is part of someone who reads it more, if it was something that happened in a previous comic, I know there would be a reference, and that some of the panels had like a little bit at the bottom, where it said, "Check out
this happened."
Check out issue number 23 or whatever.
Yeah.
And the only thing it has for that is it has a bit in the corner that says something like, it's one of those that says we don't know what this is. So, and that is a little bit of a breaking the convention in itself, because normally those are strictly used as like, check this out back in issue 127 or whatever. So I know there's a mystery here that they haven't shown yet. So for me, that was a little bit of intrigue, but again, not quite being like, oh my God, this is breaking new ground or anything. Like, I was like, this is a little something for me to see where it goes.
And again, I suppose it comes back to the fact that these are inky comic books for children.
Yeah, and this is exactly that type of one that would come out like a newspaper stand, a monthly, or in this case, bi-monthly, twice a month.
Right, every 2 weeks.
Yes, yeah, fortnightly. The us UK people might say.
Absolutely.
Yeah, coming out fortnightly, so this would be like a kind of continuation of it. And again, I found it a little better than usual because unfortunately I've read a bunch of ones that were worse than this.
Yeah.
That I was just like, why am I reading this, and put it down. And for me, being such a super fan, that general dreck of like, why am I reading this and putting it down? You can only imagine what that is. If I'm looking at this going, this is actually interesting for me and I'm going to keep reading it.
So what do we think of Peter Parker's interior monologue? Because we see a lot of it.
Yes, we see a lot of it. But again, comparing to actually some good superhero comics we've read previously, this I thought was better because it was short. There were shorter bursts of it. And that felt more realistic. As we've had this discussion, I don't think we've had it on air, but there's like a current awakening happening in the world where people are realizing that some people think in interior monologue and some people don't.
Absolutely.
So, and we are one of each, aren't we?
Yeah.
I think an interior monologue. So when I read this, this to me is like, this is a day in the life for me. Like, this is how I think.
You're just ambling about with a little voice in your head narrating what you're up to.
Pretty much, like, I'm talking to myself.
Yeah. Whereas my brain is quiet. I don't have an interior monologue.
But you say you think the same amount, but not in like specifically language talking back to yourself.
Yeah, it's really hard to quantify what my thoughts are like. They're just thoughts.
Would you say they're more like visual and audio or auditory?
They're just thoughts.
How would you describe a thought? Because to me, a thought, again, is like language. Like I could describe a thought as like saying something. Or if I'm recalling a memory, it's a visual of that and, a reliving of a memory.
Yeah.
But if I'm thinking something abstract, then I'm thinking in language.
It's really hard to describe because it's just the inner workings of my mind. So
I was just thinking of the SpongeBob meme. It's like the inner machinations of my mind are a mystery, and it's the Patrick with like the hamster wheel or something.
I mean, that's essentially what's happening. Like, so it's really hard to describe what happens inside my head because it doesn't happen in language all of the time. I can make myself have an interior monologue if I want one. Like, if I want the little voice to be there, I can do that.
And same for me. Like, I can force myself to imagine a visual or auditory. I'm using the right word, aren't
auditory
I?
is
Visual and auditory.
Yeah. Auditory is hearing.
Yes. So I can imagine a image or a sound or a smell or whatever.
Do you have? I was about to ask. Do you have olfactory memories?
As in
smell.
Yeah. Well, smell can for me. Smell can ignite visual memories. Or
I can picture a smell in my head.
That's interesting.
Like the smell of, there was, the white stuff that they used to paint on school fields in Britain in the 90s to make like the running tracks and stuff.
Yeah, I'd say I can imagine a smell as well.
The bleachy smell that had.
Yeah.
Really distinct. I'm imagining it now.
Yeah, I can. So I'd say there's no difference there. I think we can all imagine smell. I thought you were going down a route of like, you could visually imagine a smell or something. Like, across, there's a thing of cross senses. People get that.
I don't have synesthesia.
That's the one, yeah. But the main point we were getting at this, just in case people were thinking it was like a huge tangent, is that there is like people recently on the internet discovered that the other half exists.
Yeah.
So, but this was one of those like, do you piss in the shower or do you stand up or sit down to wipe? Like it's one of those where people went. I think I saw it on Reddit, and I think it's happened a few, probably other places.
It's
as well.
something that happens so privately that
no one even thought to question. And what's interesting is interior monologues in film, TV, and comic books. I think what's happened there is half of people like myself were seeing that going, yeah, that's how brains work. And the other half, I would assume like yourself.
I thought it was a convenient narrative device.
Exactly. Like just a form of storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, oh, they're narrating their thoughts. That's interesting. That's a thing that happens in TV and movies. Wouldn't that be weird?
That's how the writers show what they're thinking. Whereas,
absolutely, yeah.
Whereas my side was going, yes, that's how we work as humans.
Well, because you lot just going around fucking jabbering away in your head. Weird, man.
Yeah,
weird.
Yeah. It's weird to us that you don't. Because it's weird to me for me to hear you going, I can't describe a thought. I'm like, what do you mean you can't describe, like, because I can immediately say language. Like, it's just language in my head. So the fact that you can't, I'm like, that's crazy to me.
So when I'm thinking about something, the best way that I can describe it is that if I'm thinking about, like, trees, all of my experience with trees and my understanding of trees all just kind of unfolds out of itself in my head. And so I can think about a tree without needing to verbalize the things that I understand about a tree.
See, if you ask me about a tree, so say you ask me about fucking chestnut tree or something, I would internally go, chestnut tree, and then like, what do I know about that? Like, I could verbally show you what I'm thinking as I'm thinking it. I could think, the term thinking aloud. When someone says, oh, we are, so like, if someone's talking and someone goes, what? And you're, oh, I'm just thinking aloud, ignore me. That's literally the thoughts inside coming outside.
Well,
exactly the same.
One of the things that I do a lot is I will talk through my thoughts with people. And when I do some of my best work when I'm thinking out loud. And it's because it gives language to my thoughts. Like when I'm thinking about something, until I talk about it, there's no English happening. It's just like I'm just having these abstract thoughts and I'm just kind of working something out in my head and then the words fall out. Like I don't have to think of the words that I'm speaking before I speak them. There's a sentiment that I want to get across and then I form sentences. Whereas you were telling me that you think about your work. I mean, maybe you just think before you speak more than I do because I'm a bit of a dick. But
so I would say that you start getting into like an introverted extroverted discussion. But I think regardless of where you are on the scale, it only depends on how many situations you do this in.
Yeah.
So I think even though I think in language, I can still have a stream of consciousness where it skips the brain. So literally not thinking about what you say before you say it, like we do pretty much on this. Like, we haven't got time
Yeah.
to prepare an hour's worth, hour and a half worth of speaking.
Yeah.
So there's still a stream of consciousness. But the difference is, if I then stop and think of something, the language just changes from outwardly to inwardly. That's the difference.
Man. So, we've gone on a tangent.
Yeah.
All this to say, we see Peter Parker's interior monologue here.
Yeah. I found it more realistic speaking as a interior monologue person. We need names for these types of people. Innies and outies. No, that doesn't work.
I'll look it up. I'll do some Googling. Next week, we'll come back with some names.
Sure.
The thing that I find, and I often find this, is that when you show me too much of an action star's inner workings, kind of makes them feel a bit slow to me.
Yeah, there's definitely a definitely huge difference with action with or without monologue. And to be fair, there's a couple panels where that happens here, but it's in between thoughts. But I get what you mean. Like, my favorite comics undoubtedly are ones where longer action scenes, fight scenes, whatever, don't have any additional dialogue or anything.
Yeah.
And I get to enjoy the art and the actions as they happen. But this is, I think this being, 20 pages an issue, rough give or take, and having a limited time, it's definitely not my favorite still, but I accept and can still enjoy when it's short lines. And the reason being is because, again, like I said, that's more realistic to me as someone who thinks like that. If you're doing a lot of stuff and you're also trying to think like quite intensely about like what you're next going to do, or, like you're trying to work something out while you're doing stuff, it's not like long paragraphs of monologue as we've seen in other comics.
Yeah.
It's short lines where you're just trying to like, each one is its own individual thoughts and you're just trying to get through them. And the human brain, they can't be so like vast to just get across in one action
glad
scene.
that it's succinct.
Succinct, yeah.
I'm glad that it's succinct. I just find that it's the same with like Bond novels and stuff like that. If you see too much of their interior monologue, it makes them come off as a bit slow.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because it's peppered throughout, isn't it? It's one of the thematic things that they're doing quite a lot here to convey the story, is giving us Peter's internal monologue. We also have a not very quippy Peter Parker.
See, I was going to say, I think it is a good level of quippy. I was going to say
he's not overly
quippy.
He's not Deadpool quippy.
And also, I found some of his stuff quite funny. Like, I when I say funny, I don't mean I was actually laughing at the comic like I have at genuinely funny comics.
Yeah.
Like, there was bits in 8 Billion Genies that I actually like audibly chuckle, chuckle while I was reading. I didn't get quite to that level, but it was funny enough that I was like, this is good enough writing that, it didn't come across as corny or overly quippy or cheesy. It wasn't quippy for the sake of quippy.
There were a couple moments that I found funny-ish. And I know what you mean. I didn't chuckle out loud at any of it.
I did note some of the ones, which one was, can I offer you some thwip before I leave?
Yeah, no, that one, yeah.
And then he does it again later in the same joke, which makes it funnier. And also,
thwip is the sound that his web shooters make in this comic.
And I think that's quite like a...
it's a very mild fourth wall break, isn't it?
Well, I was going to say that, and it's a very ingrained thing in Marvel for decades. So there's certain sound effects that they've just always used that same word for. Thwip is Spider-Man's web shooting, and the other one is I think it's skit, like SKIT or SKRT.
Is that for Wolverine's claws?
Exactly, yeah. So those are two like institutional, like these always are written this sound, which I like that as a little like staple
isn't it?
Staple of the genre. But the other line I thought was funny was he's kind of very seriously getting dressed and getting out the window to confront Tombstone after he's looked after the kids, and he just says the last little thought is, "There's pudding in my mask," and that was just like a little like, yeah, that's funny, and that's just to himself.
And then one of the bad guys later on turns around to him and goes, "You smell like pudding."
Yeah,
and that was that I found that nod to it more funny than him realizing there was pudding on his mask.
Yeah. I also I appreciate in something like this where one character compared to the rest is especially quippy, and that's a character
trait.
Yeah. And everyone else is just their varying levels of quippiness.
Yeah, we've not got Joss Whedon, the one's nonsense here.
No,
like,
exactly.
Not everybody's quippy.
And that this is a good argument for like why Spider-Man stands out a bit better. And a character trait for him, which there's a specific panel in one years ago, which really put it well, which has kind of been recirculated as like a writer's really good explanation of it. Basically, it's Peter Parker's. He started being Spider-Man when he was 15, and he was scared to death while he was doing it. And though his own coping mechanism for intense fear and, you know, the tension of
humor.
Saving lives was to just try and make himself laugh and like try and joke around. And so that being such a character trait with this explained backstory comes across way better than when everyone else is like, every character has to be funny all the time.
Everyone's a bit grim in this. They're all a bit serious. So MJ.
We don't know why they're not together right now. Well,
she's got kids with another bloke.
So
that's probably why.
My thinking initially was, is this like a bit of a red herring where they're not actually her kids? Because one of the kids is also redhead.
Yeah.
And judging by how we talked about the art earlier, we can't trust any character trait if it's storytelling or not. But I think that might be a bit of a red herring of like making you think they're hers.
Yeah.
When actually it might turn out that she's basically their stepmom or something.
Yeah, because she's airing. We know that MJ is airing Peter Parker's calls.
Yes, I mean she basically tells him to stop calling. Point. So we know that something's happened.
That's the only part of the subplot that really had any traction for me.
The most human drama element.
Yeah, to the extent that off air, I will probably ask you what comes of it in the next 9 issues that you've read.
So
it wasn't good enough that I wanted to read more, but it was the thing that intrigued me most, that subplot.
I can tell you that I'm at issue 14 myself, and they've explored the relationship as it currently is more.
Yeah.
And there's been development, but they still haven't revealed, unless I've missed it and unless I've completely blanked it, but they still haven't fully revealed what happened previously.
Because I'm more interested in the actual relationship than itself than the whys and wherefores of how they got there. But that was the most interesting relationship because it's obviously, you know, Peter Parker always has MJ, right? Like where there is a Spidey, there is
Spider. Peter and MJ, yeah.
Yeah, where there's a Spider-Man, there's an MJ.
And also, interestingly, they also have the Black Cat, which is also his kind of side chick, for lack of a better term. But it's an interesting one, especially with Peter Parker, because normally these superheroes have like one, and he does to an extent, one specific other half, or, you know, romantic goal, or however you want to describe them. Spider-Man has always had MJ as the main one, but Black Cat's always been an interesting one because she represents the Spider-Man side of his life.
Yeah.
And the fact that he could, if he chose to, have separate romance. Well, back in the day, he could have. Now, MJ and Black Cat know each other. So that's kind of, you know, they're probably not into that.
Well, again, because from my experience of Spider-Man films, sometimes his romantic interest knows he's Spider-Man, sometimes she doesn't.
Yeah, normally there's a point where they reveal.
Out.
One of the problems with Marvel and their soft rebooting is they'll keep stuff going, but they'll keep rebooting the stories, but they'll keep the narrative going. So the problem is, technically, Spider-Man and MJ have been married, and then after he revealed his identity to the world in Civil War, had to make a deal with Mephisto to give Aunt May one more day. The story that was pretty much critically reviled was One More Day.
Right.
And Mephisto was like, yeah, I'll let her live, but you guys have to like forget you were ever married or something. And yeah, it was horrible. And
le garbage.
Yes.
Monsieur, you ordered the garbage.
And that's where most comic book fans would agree with you, actually.
Yeah.
We should probably do that one at some point.
Oh, fucking hell.
The worst of the worst, just to see how you get on with that.
I mean, I get less riled about it when you don't disagree with me that it's bad.
True, but at least it's good that we've had. I think the discussion is more interesting than if we both went, well, this is shit anyway. Like,
I think it is. Yeah, no, we got into it. We had a chat about it. We aired our grievances.
And luckily, most of the time, we do better stuff that we just talk about how good it is. And to be fair, I think I've got one lined up for next week that'll be a better read.
I can read garbage.
I mean, like I said, I try and space out the vegetables so we get a bit of good stuff in between.
I can waste my ever perspiring sentience and life reading garbage. That's fine.
I mean, your sentience might be aspiring. I plan on living forever, personally.
Right. Okay.
We're at that age where if we make it to like 70, 80, they're just going to plug us into AI.
Yeah,
like,
and I don't want that.
A body in the trays that in the morgue where they put bodies in. One of those, like Futurama, AI, plug in the brain, bang, you're in Call of Duty real life. That's my retirement.
I can't think of anything that sounds worse.
Well, you die, I'll take your place. And can I have his tokens if he's dying?
Can I have his game tokens, please?
I won't miss him. He's fine.
God, well, no, imagine, because at that point they could beam adverts directly into your fucking consciousness.
Yeah, they're going to do that if you're alive or not. Like,
yeah, fucking A. Where was it? I saw somebody had an advert on the screen in their car. And I was like, we have fully fucking reached. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, so screen in the car, surely not for the driver.
Yeah, the screen in the middle of the car.
That can... But the driver was still facing the windscreen, right? Like, looking at the road.
Well, I imagine they'd gotten their passenger to take a photograph of it.
Right.
But there was an advert on the sat-nav screen of this car.
Right. So just as you need to make your turning, it's like, you can either pay for the premium and not get the ads, or you have to watch this 30-minute advert before you can get to your destination. Yeah, I mean, that's just inevitable, unfortunately. But back to the comic, back to something more, I don't know, is it more better thing to talk about?
No, it's more depressing.
Equal. Come on, let's say equal for the depressing capitalism, rampant capitalism versus like a comic that's so-so, you know?
Yeah, well... And I think we're going to have this problem every time that I read something superhero, which is that I'm just going to come out of it and go, bit of shit.
Yeah.
Having said that, though, I really liked Supergirl. I quite liked Alan Moore's Superman.
And like I said before, that adds more credence to when you give those a better rating, essentially.
Yeah.
Because you've compared it to the normal riffraff, and you go, yeah, see, that I know compared to, it's not. And we know you're not into the genre, but you like good writing regardless of the genre. I like
a sweep. I think this is what I'm realizing is that when it comes to superhero comics, I like a sweeping story, and I like a self-contained, well-told story. What I seem to find from a lot of the modern Marvel and DC that I've read recently is that it's all a bit ensemble casty, and this has the same problem that the Flash had, which is that they're just throwing characters at me all the time. I'm seeing a new character every couple panels. And with only 20 pages per issue, if they're introducing 3 or 4 characters, each of them are only getting a couple pages worth of face time. And so I'm not seeing any depth. I'm not seeing any of the stuff that really interests me when I'm reading. Whereas when we read the 8 Billion Genies, over that 8 issues, we saw the same characters come back, and we saw their stories, and we saw them over 8 centuries, and so we saw these great big sweeping stories in the same amount, in almost the same amount of space. I've found out that Peter Parker is depressed, and I've watched him get the shit kicked out of him in an underground basement for a bit. In that same amount of page space, I got the entire story of 8 Million Genies. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it feels like it's the difference between like really great music and pop music.
I agree with
where
that.
There's more, like with really great music, there's more music per second than really crappy pop music where you're just hearing 4 chords on a synth.
Or like a Transformers film and Parasite, or something like.
Yeah. Like it's the difference between. Well, I mean, it's the difference between a fucking Marvel film and a Wes Anderson film, isn't it? There's just more film per second. There's more. When you get to these graphic novels, the indie ones, there just seems to be more content per page.
The only thing, I'm not saying this is why I disagree. This is what I think could be a reason for it.
Yeah.
I think they are definitely going for different goals.
Yeah.
It's like 8 Billion Genies is like, we are telling these people's story in this amazing situation. Whereas Spider-Man is like, here is the crime and the supervillain that he's dealing with this time, and how we're making it slightly different from every other time he does. And I think there's definitely a challenge to trying to make them more interesting when you've only got like a 5-issue arc to deal with.
Yeah.
And what you're saying about introducing new characters, on the one hand, I would say I knew most of the characters beforehand, but so I didn't feel like I was being inundated with new characters. But on the other hand, I agree with you where in the same amount of pages, they're still not getting into as much depth, regardless of whether you know them or not. So I feel like, I feel like you could infer who every character is essentially and what their role is in the story. But again, they're not using the pages for the same kind of like depth of a human drama or anything. It's more like setting up like, here's why crimes are happening and here's why Spider-Man has to stop them and everything like that.
And I get that, but
I think a better one to equate
doesn't have to be. So what you're saying here is that we're not seeing as much depth of character because there's plot, and the plot is more important. But plot doesn't have to come at the detriment of seeing something human and actually seeing character development. I think when action is working really, really well, we see both. Which is why something like the Sharp novels are so good.
Well, I was about to say, I don't know if this is a good example of what you're saying as well, is something like Rogue Sun, when we read that.
There was character development in with the plot, wasn't there? And it was pretty good.
But I think the difference...
Rogue Sun. Yeah. Do you know what? Reading superhero comics from the big two has made me miss Rogue Sun.
Well, you know that Rogue Sun is part of a larger its own universe, so we should do something else from that universe. It's called the Black Massive Super Hole.
They were trying to bootstrap their own big superhero universe from it, weren't they? Because it was the first one in.
So the first one was called something else, something like Black Hole or something like that. I generally can't remember off the top of my head, but basically, yes, they were trying to make an image superhero crossover.
And I remember at the time I kind of talked about it and I was like, ugh, it's just superhero shenanigans. But I've read more superhero shenanigans now, and I look back at it and I'm like, actually, there was a lot of depth there that I'm not seeing from the big two. And I think a big part of that is because the big two have these really well-worn characters that they're afraid to do anything interesting with. Yeah. And you've talked about that at length.
For sure.
Often. But it doesn't mean I have to like it.
No, not at all, no.
Do you know, I get why it's happening, but I think it's turning this media juggernaut into something really stagnant.
Content creator, rather than a striving for, like, the best stories. It's we need to get another issue out, we need to get another title out. What's interesting you say is you said reading more of this kind of stuff makes you more appreciate Rogue Sun. I wonder, and we're never going to do this, but if somehow I could put you in some kind of prison cell and force you to read all Marvel and DC, how much before when you would look back on this one and go, actually, that Spider-Man comic wasn't so bad.
Yeah, at what point do I have to get to?
Yeah, basically, how much of what I've read got me to the point where I went, you know what, this is actually a bit better. Like, interesting to think about at the very least.
Do you feel like a captive? Is that how you feel with your relationship with Marvel and DC at the moment?
Well, I think you can definitely empathize with this. Everyone has their interests, and we touched on this last week, but everyone has their interests where it's the fact that you're doing something within the interest. So whether it be superheroes or I don't know, like any kind of particular fiction or guitars or something, whatever, where you realize there's parts of it that aren't the best part that you would recommend to someone if they weren't into it. But because it's just within the genre, you still get something from it.
And ultimately, I get it because I buy every Pokemon game as soon after release as I can. And often they are garbage.
And that exactly, but it's like
Scarlet and Violet was pretty like almost unplayable.
Yeah, and I think the best way to describe it is for anyone, if you're into something, it's better to be doing something within that interest than to not.
Yeah,
whereas
I agree.
For someone else who's not into it, if you're going to do it, you want it to be a good thing, a good version of it. Because if it's not, you just take it or leave it. Whereas you're still going to collect Pokemon cards or play Pokemon games, I'm still going to read superhero comics.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then when you give it to someone else, you need to give them the best one to enjoy it on its own merits and not because it's of that genre.
Don't get me wrong, like I like a Killing Joke.
And that's considered one of the best superhero comics of all time, so it's understandable.
But I like it.
Yeah.
Like it's good.
Yeah.
It's funny that that's the one that I like.
I mean, we've already established Alan Moore's the greatest comic book writer of all time.
Yeah. Like,
it might not be a Zeb Wells who wrote this comic, but he's up there.
I mean, he did not. The story was fine. It was serviceable.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Now that you've pointed it out to me, that those nuances are there, I'm like, yeah, that is slightly different to the format that we would normally see. But,
and I saw that because I'm so used to
you're entrenched
the
in it,
one,
aren't you? Yeah. But I don't necessarily. It's tough. It's tough.
If you showed me a Pokemon game that was like shit, and I played it and went, oh yeah, this is shit, and you went, yeah, but most of them do this thing, whereas this one actually does it differently, and I went, oh, okay, that doesn't make it better or worse.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely,
it's the same
yeah.
thing, yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like if I put Scarlet and Violet in front of you, and was like, tell me why this is a bad game, you'd give me all the reasons it was a bad game, and then I would look to you and say, this is why it's a bad Pokemon game.
Yeah, that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, isn't it? And I suppose that's what's happening here. I don't know that I'm ever going to reconcile my issues with the genre.
Well, I think going forward, if we do this kind of stuff, we'll inevitably do like a couple of superhero things every once in a while. And I think the best thing that we can do to keep it interesting is, from my side, I can go into the nuances all day, every day.
Yeah.
But I think for you, it's the best thing to make it interesting for you is to kind of get into what specifically about it. So for this one, it was the art. Whereas in the Flash one last week, you didn't get into the art as much. It was the writing that was a bigger issue for you. So getting into the nitty-gritty of why it didn't work is dissecting it a bit is kind of most interesting thing. And for you, as I said, you can like air your grievances in as much strength as you want, and if I disagree, I'll come back at you and make you defend them. And I think,
absolutely.
but that in itself is the interesting part that we can get into.
Yeah, and this is the thing. I think when I was dissecting this corpse, the artwork was so bad it just took me out of the experience in general.
And whereas I was just more focusing on the writing, which, and I get like, I think me being so into it, I'm focusing more on this thing that's a little positive, whereas you're focusing on the more obvious negative.
Yeah.
Whereas that kind of stuff just washes over me at this point. I'm like, it's fine.
The thing I will say is that most of the human beings who are speaking sound like plausible humans.
Yeah, the writing is. The writing's
Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
and that has been an issue in some of the superhero comics that we've read. I mean, even the ones like.
Do you know what the writing here kind of reminded me of?
Yeah.
And I think we'll see if you agree. So this reminded me of a previous Spider-Man comic I read, which was more recently Spider-Man Life Story. So that was an interesting kind of limited series where basically they took the entire common history of Spider-Man from the 60s to the noughties, and they made it one continuous story.
Yeah.
So him being a teenager in the 60s to him being a 50-year-old in the noughties. So it's one
cool.
long continuous. And it was written by Chip Zdarsky, who is
cool.
not only a well-known comic writer specifically,
but we liked his
public domain.
Public domain, yeah.
Did you find the writing? I thought it was a bit public domain style. So this isn't Zdarsky, but I thought it was that similar kind of vibe.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm inclined to agree with you. And most people were kind of believable. I particularly liked Aunt May.
Her writing, I liked a line from hers where she said, I'll always believe you, so it hurts to hear you lie. Like, little stuff like
that was good. Like, I thought Aunt May was quite well written, actually, I'll be honest with you. I liked her dialogue. They conveyed kind of the wise older person quite well through her.
I tell you one bit of the art that I did like.
Oh no.
I liked the panels, and not necessarily the panel layout. I think I saw more of the, once you pointed out the issues with the layout, I kind of now retroactively agree.
Yeah. But
the panels on the page where Tombstone's coming out of the house after the explosion, I thought the smoke effect was really good. Lots of lines.
Tombstone looked super inconsistent panel to panel, but he always looked all right, didn't he?
Yeah, but specifically the smoke effect as well. Like, it was cool how he kind of came out through the smoke. And you knew he was going to, because he's like a super villain. Like, house explosion. Fucking, was this, a Tuesday? Like.
So the one question I have about him.
Go ahead.
big grey man with sharp teeth,
Yes.
right? Nobody in his life seems to realise that he is... Or everyone kind of realises he's a supervillain, but they're all just kind of getting on with it as if he isn't.
So it's because he's a mob boss more than a supervillain. So it's more like The Godfather, where it's...
So why does he look the way he does?
So I don't know this specifically. I've seen him in a bunch of stuff, and I think I've seen some stuff where something's happened to him, and I've seen other stuff where he's just born that way. And sometimes in Marvel,
Baby, I was born this way.
but like this way.
Baby, we were born to run is what I was trying to find.
So he's a bit stronger and he's a bit more resistant. Like his skin is like stronger, but like the recent Spider-Man game was the most recent before this iteration of him. He had like cement strong skin. So Spider-Man couldn't actually do anything about him, and he had to like develop a gas to nullify his skin effects so he could beat him.
Because we see him as a little boy, and he's normal. Very blonde.
I don't think he was normal as a kid. I think he was, I don't think he was as whatever he is as he is now.
I mean, again,
he was pale.
He was, but he was a pale little blonde boy, not a giant grey man. And so he explained the teeth because he sharpened them himself.
Yes.
He sharpened his gnashes as weapons. But yeah, I mean, again, I suppose because the character will have appeared many times and comic book nerds are what they are.
Yeah.
They don't need to give us a backstory for him every time. So I get it. I get why we don't get that. But also just kind of looking at him, I was like, this might be the point where I stop being able to suspend my disbelief for this.
Yeah, everyone
because he's
that.
not even making an attempt to like hide who and what he is. And he's got a very normal life, and you know, his like...
Well, like again, he is a mob boss supervillain. So
yeah.
The difference is, the reason I get across that he can still kind of have a relatively normal life like mob bosses do is because like mob bosses, they have illegal activity, but it's all under wraps, and it's, you know, like, what do you do? I work in waste management, like that kind of bollocks. Whereas supervillains are like, I'm robbing a bank without a mask on, or I've got a mask, but you could tell it's me.
Yeah.
Like, he's not quite that level. He is like drug smuggling and that kind of, and owning territory and protection racket, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's why. And the fact that he looks different, I mean, in this world, they've had like Galactus turn up on their doorstep. So some guy who's a bit pale with like sharp teeth is like, that's nothing.
That's perfectly normal.
The X-Men have got their own bloody country. Like that's nothing compared to.
Yeah.
That what I did like is there was a couple of mentions of the wider Marvel universe, which again, like if you know the references, then you see them. One particular one which I particularly enjoyed was the guy, God, what was his name? Digger, the green guy. He mentioned about coming back to life. And that there was a green door. So he's gamma irradiated. That green door is a specific reference to Al Ewing's The Immortal Hulk, where he brought in this concept of gamma radiation.
You've talked about this.
Being the edge of science and magic. So they literally, people can like from the afterlife come back through the green door.
Digger used they, we pronouns.
Yeah, he's multiple people.
Yeah. Yeah, his pronouns were we, weren't they?
Yeah, he's literally he is a we us.
Yeah, his pronouns were we us. Like, that's not... You're laughing at me, but
that's true. And Spider-Man's respectful of that, I think.
Yeah, Spider-Man's really respectful of their pronouns.
He's like, they told us you killed us last time. It's like, no, you were chasing me and then you just got tired and melted. And Digger's like, I don't melt. It's like someone saying, I don't snore. It's like, you were dead at the time. Like,
so did the last time they met?
I didn't see that. I just inferred that from what we read here.
Right. Okay. So, because I assumed that there'd been another comic where he'd met them.
I think he had. It's not one I've seen. I assume he had. Yeah. There were a lot of little things, and like you mentioned earlier, nuances of like the superhero or specifically the Spider-Man storytelling.
Yeah.
Little things I liked were like Spider-Man's spider sense not going off, telling him that the henchman is not going to shoot him.
Yeah.
So little things like that for me are like, oh, you don't see that often. That's interesting. Whereas for you, that might be like you might just think, oh, that's typical Spider-Man.
I clocked it. I definitely clocked it.
It's interesting. I said you don't see it often. Like Spider-Sense being used in the negative.
Yeah.
In the negative to show like what's not going to happen as opposed to normally what is about to happen. And there's a lot of smaller things, which again I think is, if you're a superhero fan, if you're a Spider-Man fan, as a kind of getting close to a final recommendation from my side. If you like Spider-Man, this is one of the better Spider-Man stories. If you're not a Spider-Man or a superhero fan and you're looking for a recommendation, I would go by Jamie's version of events.
I would read anything else, yeah.
Yeah. If you're looking for just a good comic and you're not into superheroes, I would not recommend this.
No, it doesn't stand up on its own very well.
But if you're that person who's got the Spider-Man poster, the Spider-Man bed sheets, Spider-Man slippers,
and the underpants,
and you host a superhero podcast or something, this is a decent read for you.
Yeah, I mean, if you happen to host a comic book podcast, you should probably be into superhero comics, shouldn't you?
I mean, one of you at least. It helps if one of you.
I get that it's a deficiency on my part, that I find it abhorrent.
No, but this is what we always say, and at this point we could even make a bloody tagline. At this point, I'm the comic, you're the literate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas I read comics, and you know how to read books.
Yeah, we
cover both angles. Yeah. So we're kind of wrapping up a little. It feels like we've got naturally to the end of this. We're wrapped up a little earlier than we normally do. Yeah. So do we want to either cut it short, or is there anything else you want to? Is there anything like better you want to? Like we used to do the corners, the book corner stuff. Is there anything you want to maybe talk about in a positive way to kind of take the edge off? Because we're towards the end of the night. We record this in the evenings. Is there anything you want to finish the night on a bit of a more positive note?
On a bit of a positive note?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm reading Pratchett at the moment, which always makes me happy.
Are you rereading, or is this like a new Pratchett? I mean, not a new. Pratchett's dead, right?
Yeah.
So it's not a new Pratchett, but is it new to you? Like,
yeah. No, I'm reading it for the first time. It's called Truckers. It's about gnomes.
Are the gnomes truckers, or do the truckers interact with gnomes?
So these little gnomes have been living in the wild for a long time, and time passes much more quickly for them. So, they've witnessed a building go up. And the getting was getting tough for them. It was getting really hard for them to hunt and stuff. And it was because the humans had recently started building roads around the little chunk of countryside they lived in, and so the wildlife they used to hunt was disappearing, blah 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 blah.
Is it an allegory for like
fucking
what do you call Aborigines or Native Americans, like that kind of thing?
It's one of his children's books, so I wouldn't be surprised if it was a little bit allegorical. But they get on a truck. They manage to get themselves on a truck, and they end up in a department store where a bunch of other gnomes have been living for a long time. But one of our gnomes has a cube, and they've never worked out what the cube does, only that it used to talk to them. And they discover that the cube is a communicator that came with them on the spaceship that the gnome people crash landed on Earth on because they're aliens. And so we discover that the gnomes are aliens and they have to get back to their home planet. And it's very good.
Right?
It's Pratchett. It's Pratchett. So it's so knowing and it's so funny.
Well,
it's 1990s Pratchett as well. So it's before he started to lose his marbles. Pretty good.
Well, that sounds very interesting. If I read books, I would probably start with Pratchett or Stephen King. Those are like the two that I keep hearing are good entry level readers.
Stephen King's great. Yeah, Stephen King is a great writer, very fast writer. And so his books always have his books are quite fast paced because he writes them quite quickly. The other one that I would recommend is Douglas Adams and the Hitchhiker's Guide series. They're a great entry point into literature.
Well, like I say, I would start reading those, but I'm at the point now where I just literally don't have time to pick up anything new, to the point where someone who I follow, a creator, was saying that they just got into basketball and they're not really a sports person, but they found basketball was like quite such a higher paced sport that's easier to get into because it's so high paced and energetic and stuff. And I literally had a thought of like, maybe I should try getting into basketball. And then my second thought was, you literally don't have time to get anything else new. You can't read books.
Yeah.
You can't barely play video games these days because you have to read comics and make videos about them and podcasts about them. So yeah, I I will always say, that sounds interesting. Maybe in the next life, I'll be a book reader or
Absolutely.
something. So
I'm also just playing a lot of...
Zelda?
Yeah.
Going well still?
So good, Ryan.
Nice.
So good.
It's kind of related back to the point. There was a recent release of Spider-Man 2 for PlayStation.
That
gameplay.
looks really good.
Looks amazing. I'm getting a PlayStation 5 exclusively for that.
Oh, are you getting one?
Yeah, 100%.
We talked about it recently, didn't we? I'm excited for you because have you played on one yet?
Not a PlayStation 5, no. Played on an Xbox Series X, but
they are. I think the PS5 is better than the Series X Xbox.
They're good for different things. They're so similar anyway that it's kind of irrelevant.
The
but
chips and the kit in them are quite similar, aren't they?
Yes, it's the main difference is for me. PlayStation as a console, series of consoles, they have exclusives. Spider-Man being one of them. And I'm into too many of the exclusives to ever get an Xbox.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for the exclusives, I'd definitely get an Xbox because of Game Pass. So they have like a Netflix of video games.
Yeah.
And it's really PlayStation and Sony are trying to make one that catches up. But Xbox have like made the good version
Xbox
first.
Game Pass is better than whatever I've tried both. I've fiddled around with both, and the Xbox one was much more user friendly and had a better game library and had a lot of it had an emulator.
It's
built
all
into
backward compatibility. Sony still haven't done that.
So I did play some old games on the PlayStation 5, some PS2 games, but it was very obvious that they were being emulated.
Did you play them from disc, or did you download them on the marketplace? Or did you know if they were?
They were there. They were there to stream.
Right. So you played them through the marketplace then?
Yeah.
Yeah. They select some that they'll do that for.
Yeah.
Whereas the Xbox, most previous Xbox
library.
games, you could just put the disc in and play.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So that's even better backwards compatibility.
Yeah.
Way better than Sony or
again,
PlayStation.
I streamed an old Ratchet and Clank game that I remember being quite good, and it just wasn't particularly well emulated.
Fair.
But again, the PS5, I prefer the console. And I prefer the controller in my hands. It's just a nicer package, I think.
Nicer package in your hand.
Yeah, absolutely. I said it. I went there. I'm very excited to play your PS5 with you.
Yeah, well,
I'm very excited for that.
The problem is, by the time I get it, I anticipate making, finally, the Comic Stand videos by then.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm going to have to take a week off when Spider-Man 2 comes out and like, sorry, no video this week to my, like, by then, like, 20 subscribers if I'm lucky. Like, sorry guys, like I'll call them all up individually, be like, hey, just so you know, there's no video this week. They'll be like, who is this? I'll be like, well, Comic Stan.
I kind of feel like that with everything in my life at the moment because of Zelda, because I spent 4 or 5 hours playing it today,
right,
and didn't do any story.
Right, fair enough.
I just hit some shrines.
That's how you know a game is good.
Yeah, I hit some shrines, did some puzzles, fought some bokoblins, went out looking for some interesting ingredients to make some food with. Like, I didn't do anything story related, and I was on it for like 4 hours.
It's a sign of a really good game. The one thing it needs after you've done this is it needs a good balance where you're not overpowered from the XP you get from the side stuff.
Yeah.
So there's some games where it's so fun to play, you do all the side missions, and then when you go back to the story, you go, oh shit, I'm overpowered. And then it's just, you breeze through the story without much challenge.
What I've done here, so when you do the shrines, you get a life orb that either gives you can either spend to get more of your hearts back or more of your stamina back. I've not spent any of them yet. And so I'm going to do a couple story missions, and when the story gets too hard, I'll then say, right, I'll cash in some of my life and some of my stamina. And so it gives you the option of just not cashing it in straight away.
Well, this harkens back to the 8 Billion Genies conversation about wishes. How we'd both like just hold on and I'll probably never use the wish.
Yeah.
Because we're always like, what if I need it tomorrow? And then you just, and
Absolutely.
I'm the same with items. Like I finished Dark Souls, a bunch of those Dark Souls games with so many humanities or like souls or whatever the thing. They always change what the item is, but they all do the same thing across the games. But you have like a big like, boom, all your life back, but you've only got like limited number of these and they're rare to find. I always finish like 20 of them at the end of the game. It's like you only find 20 in the entire game. It's like I didn't use any. I was holding on to them.
You basically nuzlocked it.
Yeah, like purely out of like I might need this after. Oh wait, that was the final boss battle. Oh
yeah,
shit.
absolutely.
Like, that's me entirely. So I think ended on a slight more of a positive.
Yeah.
You want to take us home?
Yeah. So thank you so much for listening to me get angry about Spider-Man today.
It was definitely an interesting episode compared to our usual.
If you would like to tell me how wrong I am, please send an email to comicliterate@gmail.com. If you'd like to leave us a review, just find wherever the review bit is on whatever your podcast app is.
Best ones are Spotify, iTunes, or Amazon, or Google.
And if you would like to go have a look, we are currently... Oh, no, we're not anymore, are we?
We are. Oh,
Yeah.
no, by this time this comes out.
Yeah.
We were retroactively featured on the Geek Speak list for Pocket Casts, which we very much appreciated. And even though that list is now not up, we still appreciate it, and we still encourage everyone to go use Pocket Casts.
Just go have a look at Pocket Cast. Just go see it.
It's literally the one. It's the one I use. Have you started using it as well?
And it's now my favorite podcasting app.
Exactly, and we're not even being paid by them, so you can take that as 100%. You come to my house, right, and I'll show you my phone, and I'll show you all the podcasts that I'm listening to on the only podcasting app on my phone.
Yeah, no, I liked it. So thanks so much, and goodbye.
Good night and goodbye.